You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guest about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. Starting a business isn't easy. Starting a business as an independent consultant surprised me by how much goes into creating and running and growing a successful business. That's why I'm thankful for people like today's CX Passport guest, Will Bachman. Will created Umbrex, which creates opportunities for independent consulting members to build relationships with peers, share lessons learned, and collaborate amongst each other. What stands Will and Umbrex apart from other groups is that sincere desire to share the best of what he's learned with the group. I know my practice, and even specifically this podcast, would likely not exist without the things I've learned from Will and the Umbrex community. Will also hosts a phenomenal podcast, Unleashed, now daily, filled with the tangible experiences, insights, and tips that help the independent consultant thrive. I want you to right now hit your pause button, search up Unleashed, mash that subscribe button, then come back here and listen to Will's greatness in today's episode. Will, welcome to CX Passport.
Rick, thank you so much. That's a very kind welcome. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. Will, your LinkedIn headline says, what three words best capture what motivates you? Mine are curiosity, collaboration, community. What an absolutely unique approach. Tell me about those three words and why they capture your motivation.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question, Rick. So first, a little history behind that. My headline before that was a more straightforward, typical fishing line kind of summary of what I do. It was something like, Umbrex is the fastest way to find the right independent management consultant for your project. It was something like that, right? Fairly straightforward. And then I interviewed Tim Hughes on my show. He wrote a book called Social Selling, and his LinkedIn headline is, should have played Quidditch for England.
I have seen that one. Yes,
yeah,
that is I love that one.
And so, I was asking him about the LinkedIn profiles and headlines and so forth. And he said, oh, well, look, he didn't, I think, he said, yours is a little bit, so 2012 or something. And, a more interesting approach is have a headline that engages discussion. So I thought for a long time, okay, what could I put? That he says something that is about you and helps people get a better sense of your personality. So eventually landed on that, like what three words best describe you. And I can't tell you how many people have responded to my question and tell me the three words that best describe them.
That's awesome.
Asking a question in your headline like that,
yeah.
It's, it gets a ton of interest. It gets a ton of engagement. So the LinkedIn headline is super important, right? Because some people will just have independent consultant, and that's like having a book on yourself that just says book or nonfiction book. It's just, it does not engage. You're not going to pull that off the shelf as a library. So I do tell people that the headline is important. You want to make it so that if you comment on someone's post on LinkedIn, or if someone sees you in a search result, that's going to get their interest piqued enough that they want to check on your profile. So that's really the goal of a LinkedIn headline, is just pique curiosity. And that's the story behind mine.
I love that. And what I love about that is I've certainly heard that in your post, in your content that you create, try to shape a question in there so that you can encourage engagement through the comments and the like. But you've taken it one step further, gone all the way right at the top layer and asked that question in the headline itself. I think that'd be fun to suddenly get an invitation from someone that answered those questions. So love that approach. That's interesting. I am one of those that may have a little bit of a stale headline, and I'm already getting motivated just talking to you now that it may be time to take a look at that and get a change there. So tell me why those three words and what they mean to you.
So, curiosity is certainly a driver for me, right? Mm-hmm. So one of my, core felt missions in life is to, seek to understand the world and share what I've learned. And kind of that's maybe the real driving force behind what I do. I mean, I'm a consultant. Yes, I run this, I do it, but that's really kind of underlying a lot of my, kind of a consistent theme in my life is really just, I'm curious about how the world works. So curiosity, collaboration. My belief is to think about having a 5-decade time horizon on your career and be looking for ways to create value, right? To try to create value for other people, work together with people. One, it's more fun. I enjoy doing work with people that I like hanging out with and that are fun people that I can learn from. So I think that that's really about collaboration and community. That's what I've found is that you can't really survive alone. I run somewhat, maybe it's a little bit of an oxymoron, but it's a community of independent consultants where, what we're trying to do is create some of the benefits of being at a large consulting firm. People that have been at a large firm with a good culture. I was at McKinsey for 5 years, and there was just this culture that if you called up the partner in Australia who was the expert on the fintech practice in Asia or something, they would give you the time of day and spend 15 minutes helping you out.
Right.
And there was this sense of kind of shared thing. So I'm trying to help foster that in the independent consulting world of people that are, somewhat feel some commitment to each other and are willing to pay it forward within this group. One, it's more fun. People tell me that they appreciate belonging, even if they're not like reading every post or going to every meeting. There's this sense of belonging, and that's it's kind of my mission in life to help foster that.
Well, and as someone who is a member of that group, I definitely can feel that, because you can definitely feel isolated as an independent consultant. And it's nice to have some sense of community and be brought into that sense of community. So certainly I'm glad that happened to be one of your 3 words, because I get to be the beneficiary of it for sure. So I think about that. I want to think about that almost in a customer experience sort of way. And so we, as independent consultants, have our traditional clients, but you, through Umbrex, because of this community, have another set of clients, the independent consultants like me, who are part of that group. So you've mentioned a little bit, but how have you gone about from the beginning trying to build that great customer experience for those clients, the independent consultants who are a part of your community?
Yeah. So we actually started with the community side before there was a business model. So in 2008, I left McKinsey. I started my own consulting practice, the Bachman Group, and I was reading this book, Tribes, by Seth Godin, and he talks about organize your tribe, connect the members of your tribe. So I said, well, I don't see anyone else doing that, and I feel personally the need for it, so I'll do that. I was in the situation where I didn't know how to write a proposal, a statement of work. How do I find insurance? How do I get an attorney? How do I do all this stuff that I had no clue? I figured the best way to learn was to reach out to people that had left McKinsey before me and were doing it. So I started connecting with a few people. That was very helpful to me. I thought it'd be helpful to have a community of other practitioners. I began reaching out to folks, inviting them to come to meet. We started doing events. And so it really started with the community. That's where the DNA was. Along the way, some clients found out that I was organizing this community and began asking me for help finding them consultants for their projects. But it really started there. So we really try to focus on creating value for the members of the community. That's really almost our first customer. The way we do that is a number of things. So we organize events. Pre-COVID, we would do about 40 in-person events around the world every year. I would go to a lot of those across Europe, US. We would do social events as well as 1 or 2 day professional development events. We would also, now we're doing a ton of virtual events, almost 1 a week. We have a online forum for our members to connect. It's sort of a private kind of a Facebook thing, but it's a private.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. We also have access to various resources for our members. So we have access to a couple of the top expert networks. If you want to, find an expert for an interview, there are a number of firms that will do that for you. But a couple of the biggest ones, they require an annual commitment of $50,000 or $100,000 per year, which is beyond the means of a lot of independent consultants. Right. But we came to them and said, look, we have, over 1,000 people in our community. Together, we're going to be pretty material to you. Mm-hmm. So they said, and we're a vetted, set of consultants. And by the way, it's not like we're going to be customers if you don't let us do this. So they agreed to let us come in, and now we are well above that threshold as a collective. So we have access to that. We have access to templates, contract templates, discounts to things, recommended resources. So we're trying to, create value. We also will connect folks with one another. And then we do offer, one benefit is access to project opportunities, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah. One of the things you said almost at the very beginning when I was asking you about that, you said you started by creating value for the members of the community. You've always had, I can sense this in anything I read or have seen from you or listened to your podcast, you've got that sort of client-centered or customer-centered approach, be it your independent consultants or even sort of the clients that you might serve that layer beyond the independent consultants. So tell me more about that client-centered approach. It seems to be at the heart of how you go about things. I'd like to know more about your client-centered views and approach.
Well, one reason, Rick, is I don't like sales that much. Or
Amen.
I'm not a big fan of outbound, cold calling type sales.
Right.
So I'd much rather run a business that's referral based and where people talk about you. And I think if you are creating 100 units of value, you may actually be able to capture 95 units of that for yourself. And that, you can't complain about someone doing that, right? They're still creating a customer surplus. But if you say, I'm going to create 100 units of value and I'm going to take 5, right? Then, and 95 units going to go to your customers, then that's something that people talk about.
Right.
So, my goal is to create something that is remarkable, that people will remark on and tell people about. So that's sort of the philosophy of, I'd rather create something that people want to talk about, tell others about, think it's, a really great value. And I think that applies to any of your listeners in their business, whatever it is aiming to create something that people actually are going to tell people about that's different and distinct from what your competitors are doing. So, just as an example of one different thing that we do is, there are other intermediaries out there that are, between clients and independent consultants. And we thought we're going to be different because we're the only one that actually works to connect the talent with one another. And we're the only one that actually puts on our website all of the members. So you go to a website and you can see all the independent consultants. So we're trying to approach it a little bit differently.
Little change of pace here. Join me in the first class lounge. We'll move quickly and hopefully have some fun. Dream travel location from your past.
Camino de Santiago. And I had such an amazing time. So if you're not familiar with it, it's an ancient pilgrimage path, not just one single path. It's really more of a network from all across Europe, centering and going to Santiago de Compostela in Galicia in Northwest Spain. I walked 500 miles of it in year 2001. And we're going back there this summer. So my wife and I and our kids, we're going to walk, not the 500 miles, but we'll walk about 60 or 70 miles of it this summer. So we're really looking forward to getting back there.
Wow. How long did that take to walk 500 miles? I know it's broken up over stations, but how long did that take?
So it's actually not so much broken up because unlike maybe more formal things, there's really about a town every 4 or 5 kilometers.
Okay.
So you can kind of go at your own pace. You don't have to go crazy. But I did that in 24 days. So I was walking about 24 miles a day. So I'd walk about 8 hours a day, not some super crazy pace, 3 miles an hour, 8 hours a day. Lost a lot of weight. It's hard to eat that many calories. Like if you walk 24 miles a day, you're gonna get pretty trim.
Boy, I've done some hiking in the Rockies, but not to that kind of mileage. Now, I don't know that the Camino de Santiago is offered up as a diet plan, but it looks like it could be a side benefit of choosing that.
Yeah.
So thinking of the future, what is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Oh, wow. Okay. I've never been really I mean, I've been to India, but I've never really explored Asia much. New Zealand sounds amazing.
Hmm.
I'd love to explore Japan, Bali and Indonesia. Just and I really should get to know something about China, right? So China is like, what, the world #2 economy? What is it?
Right.
And I've never been to China. So I've been to India several times, but that's it for Asia for me. Love to go there.
Love that. And so I'll categorize that as dream travel locations you've not been to yet. You've got that same wanderlust that I have. What is, thinking back to the food, favorite thing to eat?
Wow, that is tough.
Yes.
The thali from South India is amazing. Vegetarian, fairly spicy, where you get all these different little dishes. That's the one that comes to mind first. But we love to travel, and my wife Margarita is really the heart of driving that. It's been really important for her to expose her kids to travel.
Yeah.
We have 3 kids. Each of them had a passport within 2 months of being born. We've traveled with each kid before they were a year old. We typically travel internationally once a year, often to Latin America, to expose the kids to Spanish.
Yeah.
Europe, India. So we and she's been great about that. One thing I'd say for independent consultants, I actually did a short video on this, is it's so important as an independent consultant to think about what is going to be your commitment to taking a vacation and to traveling, and then to just book that way in advance. Because as you get closer to the date, it's always easier to say, oh, well, I really am, I'm on a project, I can't do it, or I'm not on a project and I need to find one. So there's always excuses
Right.
not to go. So you just need to get it in the calendar and just book it and pay for it and get non-refundable tickets way in advance.
Boy, I love that. Absolutely love that. You are certainly singing my song with travel and booking it and prioritizing that. Let's think about pivoting back to food again. Thing your parents forced you to eat, but you hated as a kid.
Definitely. It was the lima beans in the frozen mixed vegetables.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I still can't stand those. And only recently did I learn lima beans actually are pretty good if you cook them properly.
Yeah.
But they come in these little bags, right? And they're super hard and nasty to eat. That's probably definitely the worst.
Oh my gosh, I mean, I can taste it right now. I
Right?
totally had forgotten about that because you're right. I kind of like lima beans, but the ones that came in that bag were atrocious. Oh gosh.
Yeah. Now we get them for Tavernicoclides. We'll get they call it gigantes. So they get these big lima beans.
Yeah.
They cook with tomato sauce. They're delicious. They're nice and stuff. But those frozen ones are pretty bad, man.
Nice.
Those are awful.
Nice. What is one travel item you will not leave home without?
I mean, if there was one thing that I will not leave home without, I mean, this is so obvious. I can't even say it. I mean, okay. I mean, this doesn't count. I mean, saying your phone, I mean, that doesn't count, right? I typically will travel with my computer. I mean, it's hard to leave that at home.
Right.
One thing that I will leave at home now,
All right.
because my wife would not accept this, is when I was walking the Camino de Santiago, and I'll admit this here on the air, even though I probably shouldn't. What I did was, and my wife would have been, no, even my kids would be super embarrassed, right? What I did was, every morning I was packing super light. When you're carrying all your stuff, you've done some hiking, you know this, that you start just shedding stuff. You say, this is unnecessary. This is unnecessary. I can live without this. It really is a way of shedding your life of some material possessions and getting a sense of that when you're carrying it all on your back. Even the guidebook that I was using, when I would finish that stage, I would just tear those pages out and throw those away.
Yeah.
But what I was doing was I didn't have a whole lot of laundry with me. I only had like 4 pairs of socks, and I need 2 pairs every day, and only a few pairs of underwear. So every morning I would wash my clothes from the day before in the sink at the hostel or hotel I was staying at. And then I had this string and I had some binder clips. and I would just had the string, I'd tie it to my backpack, and I would binder clip the things to my back. So I had my laundry hanging out behind me as I walked, as it dried in the sun. That is something that I will leave behind. I'm not going to do that in the future.
Let's stay with that travel for just a bit. You and I have interacted on LinkedIn for some of my nature posts. And that type of travel, while not necessarily the big global travel that you and I are talking about, is so important. Where do you travel to get that same sense of restoration?
Well, one thing that I would say is it's also important to think about traveling locally, right? So actually exploring your own neighborhood, you can be an exotic place if you are paying attention. So, and if you really look for things. So I took this life-changing course in college from John Stilgoe, who still teaches at Harvard in the Department of Visual and Environmental Studies, teaches landscape history. And so he really taught me to explore the built environment. So for example, here's one. There's a great book, The Urban, I think it's The Urban Weeds of the Northeast, right?
Okay.
And so I'll take my kids out and we'll go and look to identify the weeds that are growing in the sidewalk just in our neighborhood around the block.
Yeah.
And normally, if you're just walking by, you just sort of parse them as weeds, just like those are weeds. But if you start paying attention, right, and actually learning to identify the different plants, then you start noticing which ones grow in which environments, and you start noticing the actual variety of it. And it just adds layers of depth to that local lived experience. So explore your local built environment.
That is, I like that. There is the travel slow, travel deep type mentality. I like what you're describing there of even just looking at the weeds. And I would be guilty of just walking right by the weeds or trying to find the nearest Roundup to get rid of those weeds. So I'm going to have to check out the book, and I will put that book in the notes for anyone who wants to check that one out to motivate them to travel a little slow. Now, I know that you do have a place, I believe it's in Pennsylvania, but out kind of in a farm environment. But you also live in, quote, the city, right? Or New York City to those of us who don't live there.
We split our time. Yeah, we split our time between our farm in Pennsylvania that was my great-great-grandfather's property.
Oh, nice.
And we live in Astoria in Queens.
So what's it like to call a place home that others have on their travel bucket list, right? You and I were talking about the places that we want to go to. Well, for a lot of folks, New York is that bucket list for some. What's it like to have that be home?
Yeah, well, some people here say New York is a great place to live, but I wouldn't want to visit. I think that the difference is that if you're a tourist, you often feel obligated to see some of the tourist attractions, right? So you see going to Times Square and wandering around and saying, what should I do here, and so forth, and going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and MoMA and so forth, the Natural History, the Central Park, and just hitting some of those things. My own thumb rule about travel in general is that the quality of restaurant, so the tourist density is sort of related to 1/r² of the distance from the tourist attractions, right?
Yeah,
so as you get away from the distance from the tourist attractions, you get much more into like local resident population. So really, when you go to any city, particularly obviously for restaurants, and I know for your listeners this is straightforward, but go run far, far away from the tourist destinations, when you're eating. And one thing when we travel, for example, is we love to go into the local supermarket. That's one of the most, insightful pieces into how local people live. So I suppose I'm still discovering the city. I've been here for 20 years, and only just about 3 weeks ago did I finally get a city bike membership, and it has been transformative. It's been so amazing. My wife has been telling me for years to do this. I finally got one, and it's so awesome to explore a city by bike. I'm now in this thing where I drop my daughter off on the Upper West Side because her school is in this temporary facilities there.
Yeah.
So I take an Uber with my daughter, drop her off there, and then I get a city bike and come home. It's about 5 miles, and it's just so
that's
awesome.
Great.
Go through Central Park, go across the East River, across Randall's Island, across the Triborough.
Oh man.
So anybody coming to New York City, you will get more of a view of what locals experience. Definitely get a day pass, a city bike, get a city bike and just cruise around the city. And it's just a great way to explore New York City.
I have taken advantage of the bike tour of certain cities. One of our fondest memories traveling as a family was doing the bike tour in Florence. And so it's not the same as just, hey, go wander, get on a bike, but it was so much different to be on a bike traveling through all the sites and having it, explain to you what you're seeing and those sorts of things. And you felt, even while being a tourist, you just felt a different level of connection being on the two wheels as opposed to maybe staring out of the window of a bus or something along those lines. So,
one thing I love about Europe now is how many different cities you can rent a bike. So in Munich, I use the Donkey Republic app, and in Zurich, you can use Lime. So almost every city there, you can rent a bike with one of these apps. And it's just a great way to explore a city.
Such a great way to get around and just feel that depth. And even I have found that people find you more approachable when you're on a bike. I don't know what it is, but the conversations can start more authentically when you're on a bike, perhaps. Maybe you just seem like you're more local as opposed to an outsider. Hey, let's come back and close out with the consultant discussion. Sure. And I'm not a fan of saying if you could say just one thing, because I tend to live life in more of a spectrum than sort of a binary, it's one thing. But instead, maybe think of if there are listeners here who really love customer experience and are thinking about starting their own practice. So they're thinking about becoming an independent consultant. What are some of the most vital points for someone going into that independent practice to consider?
So this is not my answer, but I'll set to the side. Slightly self-promotional, which is I did actually put together a whole course with 90 videos on how to set up your own consulting practice.
I'll shout that out too, Will. That course is phenomenal. So helpful indeed. Keep going. Sorry.
Okay, so thank you. So if someone's interested in that, they can go to umbrex.com and look up the Start Your Own Course tab. So that's kind of that's my 3-hour answer to your question. The shorter answer, probably the first place to start is if you're thinking about starting your own practice, I'll try to keep it to one, maybe 2 or 3. One is, what are your objectives? What's your objective function of doing this? Is it to make more money? Is it to make a certain amount of money? Is it because you want to have more control of your lifestyle? It's because you want to serve a certain type of client. So that's one thing, is just to get clarity around what your true goals are for doing it. Because some people just do it without really thinking that through. I'd say another thing is think about, really get clarity on what your fishing line is. That's a David Fields term.
Okay.
And and what your strategy is. So what specific clients are you trying to serve, and what problems are you solving for those clients, and getting clarity. So many people, they have this problem of the raspberry jam where they just spread it so thin you can't taste it.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, I want to have a really big target, and they're like, oh, I do operations and marketing and finance, and I do telecom, and I serve pharma, and it's just forgettable. So be known for something. And I'd say finally, do what you're doing, Rick. You're really being a great role model here, is have some mechanism, some ongoing mechanism that you will create content and also be able to build relationships and learn something about your industry on an ongoing basis. You got to find some way to bake that into your schedule. And doing what you're doing here of creating a podcast is a great way to do that. It's not the only way, but having some mechanism where on an ongoing basis, you're going to continue to touch the market and have interesting conversations, meet people, build relationships. It's very easy not to do that. Very few people actually go ahead and do it. But whether you're interviewing people and writing a blog post about it, or doing a podcast, or doing a video series, I think that that's super critical as an independent consultant for your long-term business development. So long answer.
No, but it's great. And I think those are 3 nuggets that people can absolutely walk away with. And I appreciate that. Will, it's been brilliant talking with you. I love getting to interact with you, and I love hearing the wisdom that you've shared, even from the very beginning of reshaping our LinkedIn headlines. It's great to hear about curiosity, collaboration, community, and how that weaves through everything that you do. I'm sure you get plenty of clicks off that headline. I certainly enjoyed learning about the travel that you, and I will say, when you talked about the Camino de Santiago, you mentioned 500 miles. There is a song that is now rolling in my head, unfortunately, because of that, but I don't have the rights to it, so don't worry, it won't show up in the episode. But your approach to just that slow travel and immersive travel, I think so much of that is who you are and what you bring to the business world, and how you really try to build those authentic relationships with both the independent consultants and then your ongoing clients that you serve. Will, it has been an absolute delight talking with you. I've learned more today than I had known before. I think there's a lot to know. I think people will benefit from going out to umbrex.com and learning more about you and your company. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I have enjoyed every bit of it.
Rick, it was a real pleasure. I'm a big fan of your show, and thanks for having me as a guest.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. Make sure to visit our website, cxpassport.com, where you can hit subscribe so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, you can check out the rest of the EX for CX website. If you're looking to get real about customer experience, EX for CX is available to help you increase revenue by starting to listen to your customers and create great experiences for every customer, every time. Thanks for listening to CX Passport, and be sure to tune in for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.